Just off the iconic US Route 66, in the old downtown district of Holbrook, Arizona, lies a street with a name as intriguing as its history, Bucket of Blood Street. However, that is not the only thing with that unique moniker here. There is also the Bucket of Blood Saloon. With names like that, it can't help capture the imagination of those who hear it. Pictures of old Wild West movies flash through one's mind, or tales of outlaws of the past. In the 1880s, the town of Holbrook quickly gained a reputation as a frontier town where lawlessness was abundant. A desert town that was mainly populated by ranchers, outlaws, cowboys, and cattle rustlers, and was known for its gunfights, Holbrook had a reputation as a town too tough for women and churches. Join us as we explore some of the folklore and history of Holbrook, Arizona, and the Bucket of Blood Saloon. If you happen to be traveling along Interstate 40 through Arizona and get to the town of Holbrook, if you take exit 77 south and follow it, just past the train tracks, you'll see the sign, Bucket of Blood Street. The town of Holbrook wasn't just another town on the frontier, it was the place where legends were born. It was known as the roughest, toughest, most lawless, bloody town of the Old West. Holbrook's rich history with tales of outlaws, shootouts, and rowdy cowboys that rival the most infamous towns of the era. In the 1870s, Holbrook was a modest settlement, and it was a vital part of the stagecoach route. It wasn't too long after that the Atlantic and Pacific Railroad transformed the area into a booming little town. Not only did the railroad bring more business and traffic, it also drew the attention of the notorious hash knife cowboys. The Bucket of Blood Saloon is widely known by pioneers as a famous landmark in Holbrook. Accounts of what took place vary, with newspaper reports and memoirs offering a glimpse into the chaos that ensued. These stories paint a vivid picture of a lawless town caught in the throes of the Wild West. And the late 1880s was marked by violence, with the town losing about 10% of its population to gunfights and brawls, many which took place within the saloon walls. The saloon was originally named Tarah's Cottage Saloon, or the Cottage Saloon. However, later it was renamed the Bucket of Blood Saloon. The name was changed at a later date, but it was given the nickname Bucket of Blood Saloon after one particularly violent fight. So, how does a saloon get the name Bucket of Blood anyway? It all began with a card game between some sheep herdsmen and some cattle rustlers. A card game that ended with death and blood and a nickname to last the centuries. As the story goes, two sheepmen from New Mexico came to the saloon to have a drink after selling some of their sheep. The two sheepmen from New Mexico were Ramon Lopez and Rafael Chavez. However, they were not the only two involved in the card game. There was also a Joe Crawford and a Walter Bell, who were also wranglers from the hash knife outfit of the Aztec Land and Cattle Company. No one really knows for sure exactly what happened that day, but what started as a card game turned to heated words and then them shooting at each other. When the whole thing was said and done, Mr. Lopez and Mr. Chavez were both dead on the floor. Mr. Bell and Mr. Crawford made their escape, with Mr. Crawford being wounded. Mr. Crawford and Mr. Bell backed out of the saloon, got on their horses, and rode out. Some accounts state that Mr. Crawford eventually succumbed to his stomach wounds. In another account, based on the memoirs and newspaper articles of Albert F. Potter, in it he states the roundup on the Little Colorado River Range had just been completed and the herd was being held at a lake about 12 miles east of Holbrook. As the saddle horses were being brought in about sunrise from towards Holbrook, two riders were seen. One of the riders had a cloth wrapped around his head. As they drew nearer, it was seen that the man with the head bandaging was seriously wounded. He then goes on to say, "We then recognized them as Joe Crawford, a cowboy who had worked for the Aztec Land and Cattle Company, known as the Hash Knife Outfit, and George Bell, a gambler. Crawford was so weak that he had to be lifted from the horse he was riding. We laid him on the horse wrangler's bed, and with a handful of flour from the cook's bread pan, I plastered the wound on his head and stopped the bleeding. Examination showed also that a bullet had passed through the cuff of his shirt and the coat sleeve and just grazed the side of his body. Scars of other old wounds showed this was not Crawford's first fight. Bell told a story about there having been a card game with Ramon Lopez and another Mexican when controversy arose about a deal in the cards, and Lopez struck Crawford over the head with a 6-shooter. That started the real trouble. Crawford drew his gun and killed Lopez. Then the shooting became general, and Crawford killed the other Mexican, who fell beside his partner. The bartender in the saloon reported it as having been a right lively battle. Potter goes on to say that Bell said the Mexicans were organizing a posse to pursue them, and he feared that if captured, their fate would be a lynching. He states that he told them that our outfit was for the law, and that we could protect them from injury by any mob, but if an officer came to them, they must surrender and go with him. Come time for supper, Crawford had recovered enough to get up and walk around, and was able to eat with us. He then announced that he felt he was able to ride, and that they would be on their way while the going was good. As no action had been taken from the officers in town, I saw no reason to detain them, so I wished them a pleasant journey. However, around 11 o'clock at night, the deputy sheriff did come looking for Crawford and Bell. Potter then goes on to say that he felt blamed by the deputy sheriff for letting them go, and that the deputy sheriff then returned to town, and as far as he knew, made no effort to capture Crawford or Bell. Potter also goes on to say that it is the general belief that Joe Crawford was in fact Grat Dalton, a member of the notorious Dalton gang of outlaws, and that he was killed in an attempted bank robbery in Coffeyville, Kansas, with Lopez and Chavez killed in the saloon. And depending on the story, Mr. Crawford either died of a fatal stomach wound from the shootout, or, a little later, in an attempted bank robbery that went wrong. That leaves Mr. Bell. Mr. Bell is the only one who ever got charged for it. In January of 1892, he got into another altercation in a saloon in St. John's. The district attorney decided to try him for the murders. However, because of lack of witnesses and lack of evidence, when the trial came along, he was absolved of the killings. Walter Bell went on to have a checkered career in Arizona history. So how did it get its name, Bucket of Blood? Well, it is said that where Ramon Lopez and Rafael Chavez fell, that there was so much blood all over the floor and room that it looked like someone had taken a bucket of blood and splashed it all over. For this reason, the saloon was afterwards named Bucket of Blood. Or was it really? Like I said, this saloon has a long history. Some say it was 4 years later when the press would finally use the name Bucket of Blood Saloon, when a man named Donnelly shot to death a guy named Hyatt in front of the Watson's drugstore after another argument over cards. On January 19, 1896, when the proprietor of the saloon shot and killed 2 men playing cards. Suddenly, a dispute arose and angry words passed between them. The manager of the saloon, Harry Donnelly, used a revolver to force another man, George C. Hyatt, a barber, into the street and shot him through the heart in front of the town drugstore. Donnelly was then arrested by the deputy sheriff. The newspaper report claims that when the widow, Hyatt, heard the news, she fell lifeless to the floor. There are a number of other accounts of other gunfights that took place within the walls of the saloon, but the passage of time and the lack of reliable records or newspaper accounts of the incidents make it virtually impossible to know which are true and which are legend. The saloon and street were frequented by a cast of characters straight out of a Western novel. Cowboys, outlaws, and cattle rustlers gathered here, drawn by the promise of alcohol and the potential of conflict. The tales even hint at connections to the infamous Dalton gang, adding a layer of myth to the already colorful history. The introduction of a church in Holbrook in 1913 marked a significant shift in the town's character. A town that was once viewed as too rough for churches or women. Some saw it as a symbol, the end of an era for many, including the proprietor of Bucket of Blood Saloon, who saw it as a move away from the lawless days that defined the town's early years. It had until that time been the only county seat in the United States without a church. The bar remained well into the 20th century, becoming a touristy hotspot on Route 66. However, the road trip culture that was keeping the bar alive eventually died out, and the saloon eventually closed its doors. Over time, the saloon transformed from a scene of violence to a community center, serving various roles including town hall and a general social gathering place. Today, the Bucket of Blood is on the National Register of Historic Places and is considered a historic landmark, ensuring that the memory of the Wild West will not die out like so many gunfighters. Today, there are efforts being made to save places in Arizona steeped with history of the Wild Wild West, places such as Bucket of Blood Saloon and many, many more. PreserveArizona.org is a non-profit organization that is trying to save some of the historical sites and preserve them for future generations. We personally really enjoy exploring places like this, places with history, places that show what it used to be like. We did our best to be as historically accurate as we could, but there are so many different legends about the Bucket of Blood Saloon. We really hope you enjoyed learning about how the saloon got its name, Bucket of Blood.